AMG surprises this morning with nerfing three of the strongest things in the game and essentially really shaking up the meta. I'm going to go over those here, give you kind of my hot takes, how I think it's going to break down in the meta, and I'm just overall really excited. So, first up, we have a major nerf to Thanos. So, the things that have changed are his throw on his strike went from wild to wild hit. Cosmic Portal now moves allies only. The free use of the gems is now part of the leadership and no longer part of being of immeasurable power. The injured side of his leadership is now the same as his healthy side, and the reality gem has taken some adjustments as well, which is like part of Thanos but not part of Thanos. He also gained Peerless, which is a new keyword that is in the rulebook that means you can only have one character with Peerless in your squad at a time. Currently, no one else in the game has Peerless, so it doesn't do anything right now, but it could. And then there's a new timing on Death's Decree. So let's go over each of these changes individually. So the change on the throw is a way to nerf Thanos' damage without affecting his power economy. And I think that's really important when we get down farther and see that his power economy, when he's not in Black Order, is significantly hampered. So I think it's a cool way to reduce the amount of output he is putting out there while not making it harder for him to access his kit. I overall like this change. This might be the thing that's too far if Thanos turns out to just fall off a cliff. Spoilers on my opinion. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff. I think he is going to go way down, but we'll get into that. So it takes him from being like 60% to hit it to like 40%, I believe. Well, let's actually look that up while we're here. So the change takes it from essentially 59.7 or pseudo 60 to hit a wild, and then a wild hit on 6 dice is 49.7. So essentially 50. So it's like a 10% hit to how often this comes up, taking it from 60% to 50%. I think overall it's going to be a hard change to notice, but it is significant, and it does reduce his damage output and his ability to go bowling because, Thanos' throw is sizeless, so he can hit Hulk into your team multiple times. It also makes him somewhat more susceptible to Disruption Field, and with Max about to come out, we will have 2 Disruption Fields in the game, so even more susceptible to that because it makes it that much harder to confirm this trigger through Disruption Field. So that's interesting. But the actual big change here is Cosmic Portal. Cosmic Portal only moving allies is just an enormous change that fundamentally changes the thing that is unfair about Thanos. So I'm sure that everybody listening to this has seen Thanos on the table before, but the reason that Thanos is so oppressive and worth his absurd cost is that if you try to play the game by standing on any objective in the game, Space Thanos can move you towards his team and can slowly start to kidnap you. He can get a punch on you, and he can move you off the objective on turn 1 no matter what you do. If you stand on an objective, he can kidnap you. And then it gets worse if he plays Mind, although most players don't play Mind because just Cosmic Portal is enough. Cosmic Portal only affecting allied models means that a lot of his play patterns fundamentally change. Most importantly, his ability to kidnap and punish you for playing the game on turn 1 is gone. Right now, if you put yourself on the midline, it's not significantly scarier than a bunch of other models that you can put yourself on the midline against. This change pushes him in a direction to be more of a support model, and I think that's when Thanos is at his most fun, is when he's supporting his team. He's giving them more dice. He's putting them back in the right spots. So Thanos' turn 1 play will no longer be kidnap your model towards him, punch them. It will now be a try to get on the midline, take a single punch, and move Corvus or another friendly model closer to the midline so that they can now walk and threaten to attack the midline. The Cosmic Portal change, I think, is absolutely great. Outside of just taking it off his card, I'm not sure what else they could have really done. But I really like this change. It significantly hampers Thanos' power. It also has far-reaching implications on how his play pattern works, because in the past, there's very little counterplay to Thanos once you're engaged. Let's say you get past the like kidnapping on turn one, he doesn't like auto beat you, and now you're just like in the fight trying to like out scrum Thanos. You can't use bodyguards because he can just use teleport. He can either just like teleport the bodyguard away or teleport the thing closer. Throwing him away to try to stagger him so that he has to spend an action walking back is tough because he can just space gem back and Cosmic Portal you towards him. So like even if you were like range 5 away at the start of it, he can like actionlessly get you back to like punch you twice. And like a lot of these mechanics are now back on board. Like you can use positional things to stop him. Like if you're standing in cover and he can only Cosmic Blast you, he can't first portal you out of cover and then Cosmic Blast you, or portal you into melee to punch you. The Cosmic Portal change is just going to be, it is the thing that was fundamentally unfair about Thanos, and now it is. And it also means that he can't just push you off a point dicelessly. He can put guys you've pushed off points back on points. And I like that mechanic a lot, where like, you like one of the ways to like beat Corvus is to have a character committed to always throwing him out of melee range. Like the character never gets to start and double tap something. Thanos being able to place the character 2 back and potentially having Space Bone and be able to push 2 back again, I think is really interesting. Death's Decree has been changed in that its timing window is actually better. So this is like a nice little give back to Death's Decree. Instead of you paying for Death's Decree on targeted now, you pay for Death's Decree during create attack dice pool, which is after Bodyguard, Eye in the Sky. Every defensive mechanic. You get to essentially know what's going on. It's like just Loki blanks is after this. And Loki blanks is a weird thing that's happened. Like some people have already rolled dice by the time you pay for Loki defensive stuff. So now let's say you're still playing Cabal Thanos because you think this is still strong. Before you would pay for Death's Decree and Master Swordsman and then see if they were going to bodyguard it away. Now you pay for Master Swordsman, you attack them, or you attack them, pay for Master Swordsman. They decide where the attack goes, they decide what their dice pools are, they do all of their buffs, and then you get to attack Death's Decree on top if it changes your exchange. It's a significant buff for Death's Decree. A lot of the stuff that used to hose Thanos in that specific way doesn't anymore. And I think that's fine because Thanos is easier to disrupt than he's ever been. So having Death's Decree, which is clearly the best thing on his card now, being harder to disrupt, I think is fine. Or the other thing about Death's Decree is that it stayed 2 dice healthy, 4 dice injured, which was another suggestion that I've heard about, ways to fix Thanos. Talking about the free gem usage going away is a really, really big deal. It means that it just has like wide-reaching implications in that Thanos doesn't get to Space Gem himself, Cosmic Portal someone, and Mind Stone someone. He gets to do like 1 or 2 of those things. It going away, I think, is going to be actually the reason that most people leave Thanos behind. I think that most people will be playing Thanos in Black Order, or maybe Steve 1. I think he's pretty spicy in Steve 1, because in Steve 1 he can threaten the midline pretty heavily, in that like he can Space Stone himself forward, walk onto the midline, and Mind Stone someone away, or just, like walk up to the midline, Mind Stone someone. So I think there's like some interesting play on like a 7-threat or 8-threat Thanos using some combination of the good gems, which are Space, Mind, Reality. Spoiler alert, even the Realities. Worse, it's still pretty good. Let's talk about that change now. So the Reality Gem is now functionally like Malekith and Domino. So it is now a reactive power, no longer innate. It still costs 1 threat. You pay 1 power, and during the resolve critical threat or step, you choose a skull and you treat it as a crit, and then you roll your crits in. Technically, you have to pay for this power before you see your opponent's defense roll. So be aware of that, the same way that like Red Skull works, the same way that Domino works, the same way that Red Skull works in terms of like timing window, not in terms of like how the thing actually works. But so it works just like Domino, just like Malekith. It's limited to one. Unlike Domino and Malekith, you can only pay one. It can only ever do one. The mechanics that like interact heavily, like super favorably with reality, like the late rerolls and stuff, don't work anymore. My presumption is that because the wording is identical to Malekith and Domino, that the ability applies to the specific dice, not to the dice pool. So when you pay one and you reroll that skull, it does like you don't get a skull crit anymore if it gets rerolled by disruption field or whatever. And also that doesn't work on objectives anymore. So like when objectives are reroll into so before, like it used to be essentially impossible for Thanos to get pushed by a skull or by a Skrull on a roll because there were like 3 faces that stopped him from getting pushed because Crit, Wild, and Skull all didn't let him get pushed. So that was really helpful, and it also made him like really good at every pay to flip. And so it just doesn't work on scenario rolls anymore at all. Overall, I love this change. Having to explain to someone the way that like reality interacted with recalibration matrix, where you like, I have 2 skulls. I see this one skull, it's a crit, so I have to re-roll it. And this other skull is a skull, so I can't re-roll it. And I re-roll it, and that as soon as I drop the dice, that other skull that I wasn't allowed to re-roll is now a crit. And so I already have a success before I even re-roll my dice on my recal. That shit is gone. And good riddance. Okay, so we talked about that. The leadership changes, I think, are for the best. I thought this was kind of like a lame way to fix him, but I ultimately think it will be an effective one. The free gems going to Black Order, and I think I think it's a good way to have Thanos still be really strong and terrifying in Black Order while having him not infect every other faction in the game, or every faction that has like a good stuff leadership, like Guardians or whatever. Oh, maybe he would see play in Black Bolt and Humans, because then he could have 4 power as the very first activation and still get to do a lot of his nonsense. And like Black Bolt likes to be carted around. Maybe there's play there. Anyway, back on track. The other nice give back to Thanos is that Death's agenda, his leadership, is not terrible on the back. On the back side, you used to be able to take damage to buy rerolls. And like that is never worth it. It's like you have to be like, this specific roll you're doing has to be like game deciding for you to want to do that. And so essentially he just like didn't have a leadership on the back. So like Flip Thanos was the whole plan against Black Order. Now him scoring VPs every time you kill, even on the backside, means this is actually like a legitimate strategy that Black Order can build around. They can legitimately just go down on points early with the plan of catching back up by getting kills. Because, like, that plan's not going to be disrupted by your opponent randomly flipping your Thanos. I like that change a lot. The last change is Peerless. Peerless effectively does literally nothing now. But depending on what they decide to do with it, it can do a lot of things. I think it's an interesting way for like the really, really absurdly strong, really high threat models to be kept in check. Because it's essentially a restricted list for models, but it's completely independent of the restricted list, and also seems to be built into their design mechanics of it. So you don't have other things, like, that when you're designing it, it's never going to have to be played around Thanos. Like, this model will never be Death's Decreed because it's also Peerless. It can be used to keep tall things in check, or it can be used to just prevent specific interactions. I'm optimistic about this mechanic. It is absolutely a sledgehammer of design. It is not elegant in any way, but also like it's a good safety valve to have there, even if they never use it. I'm interested to see how they use it. I will probably have more thoughts about peerless a year from now when we see a release or two that is peerless, or other things get errated to be peerless. I hope they don't overuse this mechanic. I hope they fix things instead of just making them peerless. I don't ever want it to be in a spot where like it is functionally like the restricted list, or it is functioning like the restricted list. So like, and by that I mean that right now when you're building your roster, you're like, okay, what are your 2 restricted tactics cards? As of right now, I don't think people are like, okay, so you start with Thanos because he's the only peerless model, and you have to have a peerless model. What else are we doing? And I hope the peerless thing never gets to that point, but maybe it will. We'll see. Okay, moving on. We have our Thor 2 nerf. So, Thor 2 was the biggest thing at LVO. When we got to semifinals of LVO, there was a Midnight Suns player, Alex, from my podcast, was the only player not playing Thanos or Thor 2. Oh, no, he was playing Thor 2. What am I talking about? He swapped Thor 2 in for day 2, or for the Invitational after the LCQ. So of the top 3, or of the top 4 going into semifinals, or the 4 undefeateds in semis, we had Asgard, we had DeLuca's pile of like Asgard, Cabal, Dormammu. We had Greg's Thanos Cabal, and Alex's Midnight Suns. So yeah, so it was Lucas Pile, Midnight Suns, Asgard, Thanos Cabal. So essentially, every one of these players had one of these 2 models, and 2 of them, I believe, had both of them. So these are the 2 strongest things in the game. Like, pretty much hands down, pretty much agreed by the top players, and AMG agrees because they're nerfing them. So for Thor, let's run down his changes. Builder to range 2 from range 3. Builder from 7 dice to 6 dice. Have at thee, which is the pounce, from 3 cost to 4 cost. Brothers in Arms is banned. These are significant changes to Thor. Thor was hands down the strongest thing in the game. Super easy to deliver, super easy to protect because of the suite of tactics cards that Asgard had access to with Rainbow Bridge, Brothers in Arms, and Odin's Blessing, on top of playing Brace. So like you started with those 4 cards, you played either probably Recal or Doomed Prophecy, depending on your matchup and whether you were going first or not. And Thor did nothing on turn 1, Bill did nothing on turn 1. You play Rainbow Bridge. You teleport them both 3. They can't be advanced, placed, or thrown. And then Thor has 3 extra dice. So he was doing 10 die builders. Made Thor really, really easy to... It made it really easy for him to like kill 2 or 3 things. And then often could, into the lists that were good at dealing with him, if they could punish him and he didn't kill enough stuff, he could pounce away. That line of play is somewhat hampered because its range is been lowered by 3 inches, so it doesn't out-threat a lot of the stuff that it used to out-threat. It used to out-threat like everything in the game. Everything in the game had to like walk attack him. And now some things can like charge into him, like the long movers and stuff. But most importantly, Brothers is gone. So like the maximum damage output turn is gone. Great. Excellent. As soon as they saw that interaction, it was very clear that this character was not play tested with that in mind. That's my opinion. I don't have insider information for that. It's very clear that they didn't think about that, and then it got on the restricted list very quickly. It should have been banned immediately because a lot of Asgard players, including Eric, who's from my meta in Sacramento, who ended up winning LVO, just played Brothers. And like it's really telling where you're like, oh, but Asgard has a 16 threat problem. What's their solution? You play leaderless. You just play Hulk, and you don't play a leader, and your leadership is Brothers in Arms, because Brothers in Arms is that strong. All right, card's gone. Great. Excellent. Good job, AMG. Killed it. I wish it had come sooner, but whatever. Better late than never. I have legitimate concern here that this is not enough. So let's talk about what these changes do and the implications of them. So his ideal turn, or like his average turn, or a turn in where, that's not even correct, a turn in which he can access his entire kit. So he will do double builder, have at thee, and the long throw. its average damage is reduced by like 2 because you're less likely to hit the wilds, and each dice is like zero point 0.7 damage on average. So you're down like 2-ish damage on his average turn. This character was dealing way too much damage. He wasn't dealing 2 damage too much. He was dealing way too much damage. Now, the thing that makes this hard to fully wrap your head around without reps is that his kit is harder to access and the character is fundamentally more difficult to play because his range bands are smaller. So there will be more turns where he has to pounce to get into range and doesn't get the contact, reducing his damage by, like 4, because he's size 3 still. And the pounce does 4 flat damage. So the likelihood that he does that and then has to like builder, or the turns where he has to walk builder and then can access his kit are less, where he's like starting at range 3 of people and you're like, okay, this character can and doesn't have 4 power now and can't just like pounce into you to start his chain. But I am concerned that good players will be able to play around these hindrances and that this character will still be incredibly strong, because ultimately the fundamental problem with Thor is that unlike kaiju of the past or large models of the past, he is good at killing big things and killing little things. And he kills little things like by accident because of the lightning arcs and because of I Say Nay. So like when he would have his big turns, he would like deal 3 to 6 damage with his attack. Now that's not going to happen as much anymore because you're not getting 3 bonus dice on your first set of attacks. But you would be like, it'd be very easy for you to deal 1 to 2 like splash damage. And I think that's still going to happen. It's going to happen to a lesser extent now. But his damage, he just has a lot of it, and it comes in so many different instances. He has 2 attacks, he has 2 throws, and he has however many lightning arcs he hits. Like probably it's 0 to 4 is probably a reasonable range to give there. So that's a lot of different instances of damage. So there are a lot of turns where like Thor commits, kills the thing that he's going after, does a lot of damage to another thing, and does splash damage to a couple other things, assuming he doesn't kill 2 things. The problem is that often, as the player on the other side of the table, the correct line for you to take is to go try to kill Thor. And all of your models have like 3 or less health, making them susceptible to I Say Nay Villain, his 7-die counterattack, which is like coin flip to do 2 damage to you. And then they can stack that with like the Loki bubble of like doing 1 to you if you roll a skull. So like the likelihood that your character like charges into Thor and then only gets the 1 action that they do is like super high. And like that awful play pattern is still here. And I'm really, really concerned that Thor is going to have a Malekith-style resurgence in a month or 2. Where, like, Malekith had to be nerfed twice. And I think it has a lot to do with just that Thor has so many instances of damage. But, hopefully I'm wrong. And one of the things that I have always said about that I've said about the problem models that have been in Marvel, with the 3 big ones being Malekith, Cosmic Ghost Rider, and Thor, Hero of Midgard, is that they were too easy to play. They were really, really autopilot. They were really easy to understand. They were really easy to get, not necessarily all of the strength out of, but a vast majority of it was really easily accessible with a low skill ceiling. These changes meaningfully change where that skill ceiling is, and the character is much harder to play well. Is that going to be enough? Is it going to just take this guy out of the hands of inexperienced players and still we're going to have it's still going to be Thor Town at top tables? Time will tell. I'm very concerned that the answer is still yes, but we'll see. I hope wholeheartedly that I'm wrong and the guy is dead, but I don't think that's true. I think that he is still an every game Asgard piece. I think that Thor 1 will still see no play in Asgard because you still just play Thor 2 and you still just play through all the staggers and everything that Thor 1 should be good into, and it won't matter. But boy, I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong here. Yeah, okay. Moving on. I'm done being a Debbie Downer about it. Let's go on to Hellfire Club. So, Hellfire Club has had two changes. First of all, Hellfire Club is no longer on the banned and restricted list. Why is everyone saying there's a Hellfire Club nerf? Because it has an affiliation list now. The card has been changed to only be playable if you have Hellfire leadership, or if you're affiliated Hellfire, and then you play the card and you get that leadership on Emma Frost and you pick it as your leadership. Much the way that like the Invaders leadership works in S.H.I.E.L.D. So, the Hellfire Club affiliation is obviously Emma Frost as the leader, Angel, Archangel, Cassandra Nova, Magneto, Mr. Sinister, Mystique, Omega Red, Psylocke, Shadow King, Storm, and Sunspot. What an absolute wild list of people. So, first of all, I'd like to say this is the best way to go about fixing this affiliation. This leadership is among the strongest leaderships in the game, and like, it should be strong. It costs a tactics card. It's on a 4-threat character that's only okay. It having access to literally every character in the game. It can play whatever it wants. Whatever the strongest 9 models in the game are, it can just play those models. That's amazing. But it shouldn't be allowed to do that. Like, it's way too strong. So, like, fixing the leadership this way, I think, is just the best way you can possibly do it. Is it's got an affiliation list. And it's got a really interesting affiliation list. And also, like, it hits the fiction finally. Like, Emma was such a flavor miss because, like, the rules of the Hellfire Club are not everyone's allowed in the Hellfire Club. It's only the Hellfire members are on. It's an exclusive thing. It's not like open arms. Anybody that wants to play can play. Like, that's not how it works. And while it's fun to imagine that, like, Emma will, like, draft any particular person in an alternate reality or whatever, be like, that's what splashing's for. All right, so this thing is, like, impossible to tell, like, what this is going to be about because it's borderline a brand new faction. Hellfire Club before, if you're not familiar, used its bonus power and its healing to play just the best scenario pieces in the game. And it played just a ton of stuff that was really hard to kill, and a ton of models that were balanced based on their access to power, with probably the best known ones being Beta Ray Bill, who often has to choose between reducing his damage and getting his really strong throw going. In Hellfire Club, you don't have to pick, and you also heal him. He's like the hardest model in the game to kill, and he's going to heal like 3 or 4 every game. So instead of having 11 hit points, he's going to have like 13 or 14. Spectacular Spider-Man, because Spectacular Spider-Man is a super hyper efficient character with a really good character throw, a really good mobility trick, decent attacks, and is held back by the fact that he has a gainer, which means he can never Yahtzee into a million power and get to do everything. He has to pick the 1 or 2 specific things he's doing unless he's taking damage. In Hellfire, he doesn't have to pick anything. He can do whatever he wants, which is awesome and strong. And then the last one that comes to mind for me is Black Cat, who is the same way. She doesn't have good access to power, often relies on like picking up an extract earlier, getting blown up by someone, and then using the power she got from being blown up to steal the extract back and run. They break all the rules of those characters. And that's super cool. And you can still do some of that in your splash slots. So here, I'm kind of... nobody knows what this faction is going to do. It is probably mid-range based on the pile of models in here, as it has no innate steals in the faction. Like, none of these characters steal objectives. So that aspect of the gameplay that they would do, where they would play like Black Cat and Miles and feed them power and get their steals online super fast, those aren't around. So they're probably like fight enough to get the extracts off of you and then play kind of a score, stand on the king of the hill points. How effective that's going to be, who knows, because there's new scenarios right around the corner. So I don't know. I'd say middling success here. I do think there is some of you can like probably cut Beta Ray Bill and play Omega Red as like a really discount Beta Ray Bill. Like obviously he's much worse than Beta Ray Bill, but he is 12 hit points, damage reduction, min 0 though, and can naturally heal himself, can have Emma heal himself, can pull any size character off of a point unless they have like Helmet, like like Ultron 2 comes to mind. So unless they have that, so he can kind of do some of the Beta Ray build job while like try to live forever, push people off. He's significantly slower. I think his top end damage is probably lower, but I think he's an interesting like replacement for Beta Ray Bill. And then you can still kind of play like, and you can splash like some of the webs pieces and see how we go there. Other characters that I think are really interesting here are Cassandra Nova and Mr. Sinister. These are two like bow or like move your opponent's models pieces, giving the faction a theme of doing that really consistently. Because Emma can do it, Cassandra can do it, Mega Red can do it, Mr. Sinister can do it, Shadow King can do it. Like, so there's a big like mind control, move your opponent's models thing going on here, which I think is really cool. Also, all of these models are power starved. This leadership fixes that problem. A lot of them are a little bit soft as well. Sinister's not, but like Sinister has such power problems because it's like you often have to pick between doing his cool stuff and getting his durability engine going. Emma gives you a lot of leeway in doing that. So I think like Mr. Sinister and Omega Red are very interesting here. I think Cassandra Nova is really interesting here. When you pair her with Shadow King, having both of those in faction with a leader that moves opponents' models, there's maybe a trap house thing you can go and go like trap house with your extra pieces that I think is really interesting. You know that I love Trap House from being a foes player. So like adding, I don't know, Mephisto in there and being like super Mystic heavy and like, I don't know, dunking on a team that's bad at Mystic while still being able to like rotate out of that. They have some good damage dealers because both Sunspot and Psylocke are decent at dealing damage. Storm is a really competent 3-threat, as is Angel. Lots of people are sleeping on Angel. Angel's like an all-star right now in X-Men. Like, he's like the only reason he isn't like the main 3 that they play is that you are always playing Storm, and then Beast is also really strong. But Angel's really slept on at the moment, in my opinion. Mystique, even with Deception gone, is really strong. You could take Mystique and you could use Stolen Identity to trigger a bunch of tricks and traps and just like kill a thing that shouldn't die at the top of a turn. I think there's lots of really interesting stuff to go on and build a Hellfire Club roster. And as a known mutator, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a Hellfire Club fan. The last change to the game has been that they've added a couple new keywords to the game. They've added Peerless, Reserve, and Stealth. So Peerless we talked about. Reserve is kind of the Hulkbuster thing where the model can't be like, it can't be put in play unless an effect says it can be put in play. It like can't be it can't be set up at deployment. It's essentially the Hulkbuster, like the little guy that comes out of Hulkbuster thing. And there's like some mechanical reasons that it won't happen there, but there's probably some model coming down the pipe that like transforms in a significant way where it has a whole other card. We know that Phoenix is coming. I wouldn't be shocked if this is a keyword to put on Phoenix to start and then opens up design space for them somewhere else. And then also Stealth is moving into the innate slot, which I think is just a smart thing. Like, saves space. Stealth is an effect that's going to be on lots and lots of models. It should be a thing that you understand. They're also probably not going to, like, I don't think they need to be giving people like their own keyworded version of Stealth the way that like Storm and Nightcrawler have their own special keyworded Stealth, although Nightcrawler's functions differently, so like maybe that's fine. But that's the last change. Overall, I'm very happy with it. Thanos, I think, is in a great place. I think the people that are saying he's never going to see play ever again, I think they're just wrong. I think Thanos will still see play. He's just going to be a lot more fair than he was before. Thor is going to disappear from the meta for a little while, and then I think have a resurgence, because I think he's still very, very strong. I'm curious to see where this ends up. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that he's just like buried 6 feet under and we never have to worry about Thor ever again. That'd be great. I hate this model. Hellfire Club, it's really hard to argue that this isn't a nerf, but God, it's so cool. There's so much neat stuff going on with it. Like, how can you be mad as a Hellfire Club player unless you're only like the sweatiest of the sweats? I think it's so cool. There's so many interesting choices in the affiliation list. I'm really excited. Overall, great changes. I can't wait to see what they do next. So, until next time, guys, don't forget that fun is a finite resource.